working group, right, we started really in 2020 and thinking about how the nature-based solutions have been invested, in our policies and in our infrastructure to address climate change, to address social issues like health and different outcomes. But our question in our group really came out when we forming this group was thinking about the justice outcomes and how did those investments can be held accountable to remediate past injustice and promote just futures with communities, as we see how the current situations such as the highlands in New York, all these investments kind of perpetuate existing injustice in the built environment. So the working group, we really, time back to 2020, we started and several people was participating in how we wanted this working group to be working on what the issues are the top priorities and what can we do within our group's capacity. So at that time, we identified the top two projects we would like to work on. And I think, this is a grand kind of aspiration of what we like to do. So the first project we have worked on really theoretical framing and of justice and how does that be able to operationalize. So we have worked on this paper that's close to submission, and we call it the Integrated Justice Co-Design Framework for Practice in Nature-Based Solution toward just transformation in the built environment. So first, I kind of want to clarify what is justice. Really, justice it's about redefining the systems. So we want to focus on thinking how we can transform our system in the built environment for justice. So our group did a literature review and identified 4 dimensions of justice. The distributive justice is about the outcome-based. It's about distribution of the benefits, also the burdens, and they're really coming from environmental justice theory. The procedural justice is about process, it's about decision making, and how people can engage in every stages of the design process. The restorative justice have 2 parts. One is to recognize past harm, so recognitional justice, and then how we can remediate, correct the justice. So there's corrections and recognition. And the last part is about generational justice. So this is about how our decision made today has it is the past dependence of past from the past decisions, but the decision today also affect the future decision, the future generations. So how can we make sure our decision can be equitable across generations through time and space? And then we really want to think about how the nature-based solution be implemented, and not only implementation, but also various parts. And think about we have scholars, educators, so in the design, education, and the research, how this practice can be all integrated in thinking through. So this framework, we identify 5 stages of co-design process that will engage in every project in general. You will have starting with the project formation, you will solicit request for proposal, but even before that, how the funding is being allocated, and where should we invest, and who will benefit. So all these questions, if we can start asking early, and that's in the project formation stage. And then the second stage is through the design development. That's when we start doing data analysis and collection of set informations or interview, etc., to understand the place, and then to work with designers, planners, practitioners to co-create the solutions, and then how we implement it with various stakeholders, contractors, and etc., and how you manage. So after implementation, you need maintenance, you need management of projects, and then you usually will go through evaluation, and this is the last piece. Is important, evaluation and learning, so that we can really learn from this project and to inform the next one. And so all these 5 stages we see is really reciprocal processes, and the co-design is emphasizing how we meaningfully engage with each stakeholders along the stage. So all actors involved, including the communities, should be meaningfully engaged in this process. And at the end, the project implemented, but it's in place that will influence the community environment, and how the stewardship and also potentially advocacy to empower the community and to heal, to be more steward the project and the place, and that's kind of long-term sustainability. So our framework is trying to think of how the justice concepts and the practice can be integrated. And we think this is a really infinite loop, right? For each stage, we should ask about all these aspects, all these 4 dimensions of justice, how we can think through in each stage of the design processes. So we suggested a few sample questions in our paper to guide some discussions, but we also we really emphasize that's really just example, and each project can tailor towards their context to ask different questions, but all these 4 dimensions, you can, in each stages, that's how we can start thinking about. So I'll use one case studies to kind of go through how this might work. And this case study actually was at ASU before I joined Penn State. And we work with the South Phoenix, the charter school, Paideia charter school. And in the forming of this project, right, we work with the principal, the founder of the school. And then in the process of development, understanding the place, there is a lot of data research going on. So in this process, we can ask about which communities have exposed to environmental hazards, and what that can be the distributive justice outcomes. And we can do a site analysis, understand where are the heat exposure and the flooding hazards can happen, to understand who and where to be impacted, for example. And then in the process, again, to ask how we can co-design the solutions, we can also ask different questions, like who should be involved in this design formation, and how can we incorporate local knowledge and user experience. So in our project, we hosted workshops and asked the students, the faculty and staff there, and kind of co-create the solutions together. And then there's the implementation part. So who should be involved? How can we ensure it's equitable, engaged in this process? So in this project, it's being implemented, and it asked it involved with professional landscape architect. In addition, it also including our students who initially helped to conceive the concept, and then they also asked the staff and students to help to get the input of the design. And then after it's implemented, again, who should be involved in the maintenance? And in the school case, they also ask the faculty to build a curriculum of environmental educations, and also their staff how to maintain some of the gardens. So hopefully in that process is really the co-creation process. So in this project, we can touch on a few dimensions of justice: the distributive, procedural, and thinking generational, because it is a school children, how we educate the next generations. And then even with the monitoring and evaluation, there is a co-creation with the ASU researchers at that time, and to co-create the surveys, and then part of the curriculum in their school also have air pollution and water kind of monitoring. But then, we asked ourselves what we could have asked, because that was kind of retrospect analysis. So in this case, for example, South Phoenix, we didn't really think through how the colonization process impacts on the indigenous communities, and how we can reconcile those indigenous land. So this restorative, corrective justice has not been asked during that time. So we use that as a kind of example how we could kind of use in the theory and operationalize by asking ourselves those questions. And we believe that co-design is an important really tool and methods in this justice design practice. Because co-design really respects and integrates diversity, equity, inclusion in the knowledge and solution production. And it is a foundation to truly achieve justice process outcomes. And it will prevent from disservices and negative impacts to the community, and really cultivate the stewardship towards sustainable development. So our justice co-design framework is adaptive and iterative process. That's why those infinite loop continue to evolve over time. And it is also for the practitioners, who myself as a practitioner before joining academia, right? We have not been really asking ourselves those critical questions to make ourselves accountable for justice outcomes. So we hope this paper really try to make awareness of how we can ask those questions in all these steps. And so we can learn from and being an advocate as well for the community. So finally, we really hope that each project inform one another. So if we truly integrate all this justice series and goals in each project, and hopefully we could transform our built environment towards a more just, sustainable development. So this is diagram kind of showing how that each infinite integrated justice co-design cycles connect one another and inform one another, so that from past, present to future, each project, each process can help to truly transform our built environment to be more just. So that's our first project. Is going to be submitted for Landscape and Urban Planning Journal soon. The second project we have started, and this is connecting to the first project. So the first one we identify, create a theory, and the second project we want to survey the practitioners and people who do this research to think about what's the gap between theory and practice. So we actually did a pilot study in 2021, and with American Society of Landscape Architects Environmental Justice Professional Practice Network members. So it's a small sample to test out some of the questions. Although I must say at that time, our framework was not fully developed, so some of those dimensional justice are not fully aligned as now. But I think we will continue to work on this project. So this is just really a sample to show our past activities. And we want to acknowledge every single person who has engaged with our working group in the past 5 years. It is a long journey, and this probably is not complete, and apologize if I left out anyone, but I truly appreciate everyone who helped to engage and shape the working group along the way. And even just the first project to show how long it takes, how many meetings, and the perseverance of our group, and really appreciate people continue and work towards to finalize this project, and really appreciate everybody. And I'll let Jill to talk about what could be the next.
That's quite the surprise there, Chingwen. But I think maybe one point regarding the first project is that really from the practitioner side, people are really not trained to think about a lot more of the social challenges of society, especially on the design side. They're trained really in morphological terminologies. They're thinking about shapes and sizes and things like that, not really about how the built environment interacts with how we organize ourselves as societies. So this is where, and to some extent, it might seem like, really, is this necessary? But really, for that profession, it's really crucial and fundamental that awareness is raised. So I think Natura really provided an excellent opportunity for us to cross to that sector, including with the stakeholders that are part of it, but also beyond that. I'm really grateful for that. Yeah, so the second project, as already introduced by Chingwen, is really sort of surveying the community of Natura. I think we might think through on how that goes beyond. But we're hoping to. So we did the pilot study, and I think there were some slides on that. So the pilot study was already very informative, and Marissa, I think Lowen as well, Chingwen and I had a couple of iterations to sort of like think through on, which questions are now really critical for us to help fill the gap. And we're hoping to sort of continue building on the community that has gathered around this topic, around this thematic working group. However, reality has been that it's really a challenge to keep engaging people for long term. It's really it really, requires volunteer commitment, and I think that's one of the weaknesses of this sort of loose network. But we're hoping that we can send this survey out soon. I know I was surveying the group if we can have a follow-up meeting soon after this webinar, actually, so that we can make sure that uh, any kind of perspective that should be considered, that it's part of the survey, but also we would be very grateful and happy for anybody that would like to join us and jump on board, to analyze the results and write something meaningful out of it.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make the final note is, we know the current political climate, funding support for DI is being cut in the US. But we think this work is important. And I do think we have to be more waters. We have to be persistent of what we do, continue to do what we think is important. So I do feel this work is important, and so we will continue to work through and to find ways to make contributions to this area. So thank you all. Any questions?
Thank you for sharing. Yes, we have about 5 minutes for questions. Thank you also for staying on time. I have a question to get us started, and you all, well, actually I have a couple questions, but I have one to get us started that I was thinking about, and you kind of hinted at it in your project 2 description. So in your framework, you had at the end there the importance of impacts, and stewardship was one of them. And actually, I didn't write down fast enough what the second one was, so I forget what it is now. But I was just wondering if you had examples of or um, evaluation metrics for that. And I saw it also in your survey that the pilot survey that you did, that evaluation metrics was one of the things that got ranked lower, or was not as aligned. I think it was in the bar, yeah, this bar chart here. It was, and maybe I read it quickly. So, but yeah, mechanisms for evaluating justice was kind of something marked lower than the others. And I just wondered if you had examples of that. And I know it's hard, but you gave a nice case study if you had other examples of how to do that.
Well, I think actually there are so many tools now available nowadays. The concept framework in our paper, we did not, it's really, actually it's a perspective paper. So we did not go into in-depth about the tools and case studies in our first project. The second project, we want to gauge how organizations, I think we can ask questions whether they have, the mechanism to evaluate. So it's more like we're asking whether they have thought about this, what they have done this, but there can be a separate kind of literature review to actually to go through the existing tools, evaluation toolkit that's available that can be part of that second kind of paper literature review. But I know there are many tools there already, so we can talk in more depth how we want to incorporate that.
Yeah, I would just add briefly to that this is a survey to sort of like get a really, like as mentioned by Chingwen, a broad sense of where sort of primarily the private sector is at, and we're not there to sort of evaluate sort of how they're doing it, but really like if they are doing it. That's sort of like where we're like where the reality of this sector is. So I think that in itself is already important. And then also, while there are quite some studies that look at evaluating issues of justice, but it's so place dependent. And then all the indices that have been explored, that have been tested, that have been published, they are they're not necessarily like accepted by the broader, sort of like community. It's like, there's some people working on this, they've developed that. Yes, it looks meaningful, but it's not like there's an established set of criteria that is sort of like ranking the organizations, say this one is working more just, or this one is, or this project is more just. It might also be simply dependent on who's coming in with the contract and who's hiring these companies, whether they have space for that. So there's a lot of sort of considerations that have to happen when we're looking at the evaluation criteria. But it's a great question, and I think maybe it's one where if we are asking of like, is this happening? Maybe we should ask more specifically how they're doing it, and maybe there might be some overlaps, so we might be able to explore that and support those.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you're making. Like it, even, I mean, it sounds like first there are just not a lot of, there are some tools that are out there, but they're not necessarily standardized and replicable across all the various projects and contexts. And so that adds an additional challenge to measuring this complex and interwoven concept of justice that you're describing here. I think we have time for maybe one more question, or if you want to add something else to that.
Maybe just a small additional consideration is that like a lot of it depends on scale, but actually it also depends on like, are we looking at only human justice or also justice for species and so forth? So multi-species justice is also an important factor that is often not really considered. So those are, kind of aspirational parts that we have to keep in mind as we are doing this. But reality is we're looking at a survey that's gonna, you know, survey people. There's no real stakeholders representing animals or other kinds of species. So there are definitely limitations to that.
Yeah, I think this, I think first of all, our theoretical framework, try to outline that what is justice. Because when we start looking into some case study, a lot of focusing on community engagement, and the community engagement we think is part of, that's why the co-design part of it. It's a tool, it's the way, but it's not, it's a mean, but it's not at the end, right? So, and then what is the end? What's the justice? That's our really initial question, and try to define that first. Then when the evaluation comes, then we can have some framework that we can refer back to. So I was really thinking about, restorative justice, recognitional and generational, especially those are at the least thought of in every project.
Thank you for that. I think we probably should move on unless there are any final quick questions. All right, thank you all three of you for sharing your work, and also kudos to you all for being a thematic working group that's really stuck with it through all the various versions of this COVID, and being completely online and international and managing to make it work. And I know you said that there's the challenge of this long-term volunteer commitment, getting people to commit this long-term, and everybody's volunteering their time. But it's impressive what you've accomplished, and yeah, we are grateful that you've continued to persevere with all the various things. So thank you.
Yeah,
All the thanks for that really goes to Chingwen that continues to drive us forward.
Yeah, so critical to have a leader who is willing to keep things moving forward and organized, and even if there are breaks as needed.
Yeah,
All
thank
right. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chingwen.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I am pleased to introduce our next set of presenters who have shared a early career collaborated on an early career fellowship through Natura, and were the former members of one of our Rula IRES teams. And Rula IRES is the Resilient Urban Latin America International Research Experience for Students. And they are, they just completed a project very recently in San Juan called Youth in Cities, exploring challenges and hope for urban futures through photo essays. So I'm going to turn it over to you all, and I'm happy to introduce Margot Mattson, Shruti Jadala, and Izzy Pacenza. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for being here and for giving us the opportunity to share and tell you a little bit about our experience as NATURA Early Career Fellows. As Elizabeth said, my name is Izzy Pacenza, and I was part of this 3-person team with my friends and collaborators, Margot Mattson and Shruti Jadala. And our project was really centered around exploring urban youth perceptions of nature and cities through photo essays in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So a little bit about what we're going to talk about in this presentation. We're going to start with some background and context about ourselves and kind of what brought us to the early career fellowship. Then we're going to talk about like the development of our research question and the actual structure of our project and what we carried out. And then we're going to end off with some results, key takeaways, and our next steps for the future. So starting off with our background and context, as Elizabeth said, Shruti, Margot, and I were actually NATURA alumni. So we were part of the Resilient Urban Latin America International Research Experience for Students. That's where the 3 of us met in the summer of 2022 in Guayaquil, Ecuador. We carried out in Ecuador a community-based research project in a developing neighborhood of the city of Duran, where we really asked residents of a climate vulnerable and heavily climate impact neighborhood their things such as their perceptions of climate risks, of urban risks, their visionings for the future. And this was really meant to kind of inform the hopeful implementation of nature-based solutions for urban resilience in the future. And this really kind of introduced us to the Natura network and really got us thinking more about transdisciplinary community-based research, and is what kind of led us to apply for the early career fellowship. So in terms of kind of the ideas that we came to the fellowship with and the very beginning nascent stages of our project, through the Natura network, we were connected with what ended up being our host institution, which was the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras, and specifically our host, Dr. Elvia Melendez, along with many other people who were super helpful to our project. And we came with the original idea / original question, which was quite broad, which was, how is climate change affecting youth, their decisions, and their future visionings? So we really wanted to position youth in climate impacted areas like Puerto Rico and San Juan as kind of experts of this field and kind of like people whose opinions and perspectives we should really turn to as we look towards the future. And specifically, youth are kind of always left out of this conversation, even though they're heavily impacted by climate change and climate risks and things that they actually didn't really contribute to in the first place. And then also we were really inspired by some sort of photography methodology, specifically photo voice, where we really wanted to give participants the opportunity to take photos and kind of reflect on them as a way to share their perspectives. In terms of context and kind of things that made us change our project and our initial ideas a little bit, we really wanted to think about our host institutions' needs, their current projects, and their existing connections. So we really wanted to make sure that we were pursuing a project that bolstered and really supported our host institutions' existing projects and didn't kind of just burden them with another thing to worry about. And we also wanted to leverage our host institutions' existing connections and really kind of make the most of our short 6 weeks in Puerto Rico. There were also a lot of ongoing community initiatives for urban resilience in the area. So we really wanted to think about how we could also kind of support those and really work off of what the community was already doing rather than kind of pursuing a whole different route or a whole different project that wasn't relevant. And then finally, a big contextual kind of limitation was the limitation of working with students. As I said, we were only in Puerto Rico for 6 weeks, and our time there kind of lined up with the end of the school year, and students are obviously very busy with finals, among other things. So we really wanted to, again, work kind of within those limitations and not just kind of give everybody another thing to worry about and work around students' existing schedules. So this kind of led us to the project design that we ended up implementing and carrying out. So our main objective ended up being to give youth a platform to talk about their perceptions of their city, urban change, and urban nature. So it kind of shifted away from climate change more broadly to kind of think about how urban youth are thinking about San Juan, which is a city that is rapidly changing, and a city that, as I said before, is very impacted by climate risks in many different ways. And we really wanted to give youth a chance to kind of talk about anything that really mattered to them and not really box them into a specific theme or topic. So also, as you can see on the lower right, we are very heavily influenced by Bad Bunny's recent album called Debí tirar más fotos. And it was really kind of like a way to think about, it means I should have taken more photos. And it's kind of a way to think about how we document our life experiences and how we can use photography as a way to share our perspectives and our stories. So in terms of methodology, we worked with 22 students ages 16 to 17 years old. They went to the high school, the Academia Bautista de Puerto Nuevo, which is a local high school in San Juan. We carried out 3 workshops over 3 weeks where we showed students kind of how to take photos, like methodology of photography. They also developed their theme and what they actually wanted to take photos of and reflect on. And then the final product was that each student would come up with a set of photos and written reflection essays that kind of reflected on any sort of theme that they really were interested in related to urban change and urban nature.
So once we arrived in San Juan, we started to sort of like reflect upon what were the core elements of our project and what we more specifically wanted to focus on. And through that reflection, we realized one was that we wanted this platform to highlight youth perspectives and voices, like Izzy mentioned, and how they would like to see their communities be like in the future, especially considering the demographic shifts on the island with significant aging populations and shrinking youth populations. We wanted this platform for youth as they're going to be the future inheritors of the island, and this includes its problems and its constraints. So their visions for what San Juan should be like is, of course, very important. And secondly, we wanted this platform to be an artistic one involving photography as sort of this medium of documentation and interpretation, and in a sense, allowing the students making the invisible visible. So we introduced this concept of the right to the city by Lefebvre, and the intention was to use this framework to encourage students to think critically about their urban spaces, and not just as physical spaces, but spaces that reflect the needs and wants of its citizens, which of course includes themselves. And these photo essays were intended to be this platform to students to reimagine their urban spaces and how it could evolve better to serve their communities. So here we have our project timeline and the way that we broke up our project in order to maximize the 6 weeks that we were on the ground. So we outlined it by 3 workshops, and throughout these workshops, we had students from the Academia Bautista de Puerto Nuevo, the school, and they were majorly doing this on, of course, volunteer basis, but also receiving some school credit. And many of them were part of the environmental club. So they came in with some sort of interest in ecological learning. So in the first workshop, we gave an introduction to photographic narration and essentially how to use photography to develop a story you're wanting to tell. Also in the first workshop, we introduced the concept of sets. And from there, the students were able to brainstorm topic ideas that they wanted their photo essay to specifically focus on. So in between the first and second workshop, the students had time to go photograph areas of interest and things that they wanted to represent in their photo essay, as well as look back onto their old photo albums to see if there was any relevant photographs they could use in the photo essay. By the second workshop, we were focusing on developing the photo reflections and how to write written narratives that can accompany the photographs. And something we noticed was that these students had already had these opinions and realizations about their communities, but now they had a sort of more formalized manner to be able to have that time and space dedicated to developing these opinions. So the third workshop, this was more focused on the preparation of final formatting and design aesthetic that we would present onto the final photo exhibit. So actually the day after their last day of school, we had the chance to host a photo exhibit in Puerto Nuevo, the neighborhood where the school is located, and we had this exhibit open to the public and community members to come and see the work that the students had developed. We had a couple of students bring their family members and friends, so it was a really rewarding wrap up to this project. So here is a photo of an interactive activity we did with the students in the first workshop to introduce the concept of sets. So at the beginning, when students were initially conceptualizing a city, responding to the question that we asked about what do you think of when you think of a city, their responses largely fell into this category of technological or infrastructural elements, as you can kind of see in this photo. But once we began discussing how social and ecological elements could and also perhaps should be more integrated into a city, into San Juan, students then started brainstorming topics and responding to this question about what makes a resilient city. So this photo essay project was for students to start thinking about their perspectives on what they wanted the future of San Juan to be like in terms of documenting things that they like about their city, as well as areas that they wanted to see change in. So topics that were chosen by students largely fell into three main categories, being social political challenges, environmental challenges, or cultural inspirations, as in seeing nature as a sort of source of art or refuge amongst the chaos of the city. As well as we had some students tie in both, where they were sort of investigating the tensions between urban growth and nature preservation in San Juan and how best to balance the two. So here we have a summarized example of one student's photo essay titled Enclosing Nature. And this focuses on a really important topic in Puerto Rico and in San Juan, which is the privatization of community spaces and coastlines. So technically by law, all beaches in Puerto Rico are public, but with the growing commercialization of hotels and resorts, there's been this encroachment onto public spaces. So through the photos and written reflections, the student was able to share their perspective on how this phenomenon is affecting them and their island's culture. One line that really stood out to me is when they said, it made me think about how human authority imposes barriers where before there was only life. So in each photo essay, the student had to put a caption and also an artistic statement, and that was part of the artistic statement. So here we have another example of just a quick summarized example of another student's photo essay titled Abandoned Concrete, which focused on the underutilization of existing buildings and lands. There's a large amount of abandoned buildings in San Juan, and what the student was seeing is that there's still this continued trajectory of deforestation and construction of new buildings instead of like reamping these abandoned, emptied buildings. So this was a really interesting thing that we noticed, that students were selecting topics that were rather personal to them and issues that they had been witnessing in their daily lives. This student took these photos on their walk to their school, so it was something that they were very acquainted with. So it was a great thing that they were able to have this platform to kind of talk about something that they had noticed and been wanting to further think about and further explain their perspective on. So here, after the 3 workshops, like I mentioned, we had our final photo exhibit, and these are some photos from that exhibit. And we had the chance to like print out all the photos in nice paper and, you know, put them along with the written captions and reflections and showcase them there. And we had this interactive element where people attending to see the exhibit, community members, were able to write down their reflections, thoughts on the students' work. And this was a really great way to see if other community members were in accordance with these views, or perhaps they felt a different way. But overall, we had a really great response from community members about this exhibit, about this work, and also the teachers about the importance of this work in highlighting the voices of youth and how this is something that they would like to continue to see in the future of San Juan and in their community.
Great. And so to wrap things out, we're just going to talk a little bit of some main takeaways that we have from doing this project and how it can connect to building urban resilience overall, and some of our next steps and plans for the future. So after the 3 workshops, we had the students fill out a survey about their experiences, and here we wanted to present a few quotes and statistics from these responses. In general, we found that these workshops increased awareness of issues among the students and how these problems can be seen more through a sets lens, and moving away from this idea of a city as just this infrastructural components, but also incorporating how people, the social and ecological components fit into. And so students were able to look more closely about what was actually happening in their neighborhoods and put more attention into their surroundings. And we're hoping that this can help people and these youth think more critically about what it is that they'd like to change, improve, or even preserve in their neighborhood. And ideally, if we feel more empowered to have an influence over our external environment, we can feel more engaged and more sort of observant about what's really happening around us. We also saw that 85% of students agreed with the statement that this experience helped them develop skills needed in order to document what they were seeing in their communities and transmit their ideas. One student said, "I feel that I not only developed an opinion, but that I also established my voice." And so they were able to bring attention to topics that they felt were important to them, but maybe had been ignored by others or overlooked. And they were also agreeing that using photos and these written texts was an effective method to document their issues and to share their perspectives with the greater community. We also designed or hoped that this project would help students think more critically about various actors that are involved in finding solutions for these issues. So when we asked them about who they see as responsible for addressing these problems or leading the way into the future, the majority listed individual residents and the government of Puerto Rico as these key actors in solving these issues. One student said, "It helped me generate a different perspective of development of the city and the things that are prioritized. I now understand that it's our municipalities that need to stop the exaggerated construction in our towns. However, it is also responsibility as citizens to speak up about things in our community that make us uncomfortable." They ranked groups such as community groups and volunteers very highly as other people who could have responsibility for addressing their projects or their issues. But they ended up ranking entities like the US government, for-profit private companies, and international organizations like the UN as lower, showing that maybe these are seen as local issues that can be solved by local actors. One benefit that we saw in this project is that we were able to integrate the final exposition into an already planned community ecological festival that was occurring at a church in the neighborhood. And this provided a space and an audience for residents of the neighborhood to see the photos taken by the students and read their testimonials. And it allowed the students a place who maybe didn't have other platforms to share their opinions to be able to express these thoughts directly. One thing that we noticed during our time in San Juan, where we were able to attend several community-led groups that were focused on holistic management of the watershed, was we noticed many of the people comprising these community groups were generally older folks or retired folks. And this exhibit was a really great opportunity to kind of bridge this generational gap and bring youth into the conversation around these topics that are of collective interest. And so we think that these types of events could be a really powerful way to stimulate community conversations, and especially when they're integrated into existing structures and spaces. Another positive outcome of this project was that we were able to leverage the exhibit and the photo essay workshop as a whole to try to motivate participation in community inventories that were already existing. Our host at the University of Puerto Rico and the Urban and Community Forest Program had been doing an ongoing effort to document the ecosystem services provided by urban trees. And we're supporting a new community-led effort to document infrastructure challenges and risks in communities. So during our fellowship, we were able to help design some informational materials for these infrastructure inventories, such as the brochure you can see on the screen. And at the exhibit, we were able to advertise the project and kind of encourage the public to participate in this format. And these infrastructure inventories were similar to the work that we conducted with Natura in Guayaquil, Ecuador, years previous as students, where we did these transect walks to identify environmental and social risks. However, this version was more community-led and was allowing the communities to be both these generators and holders of their own information data, providing a more continuous model that might not require these sort of outside expertise in order to collect the data to begin with. And hopefully this information can be used in conversations with the municipality to request interventions or targeted improvements and allow community members to really bring data to these bargaining and discussion tables around how to develop urban futures that are going to take into account of their resident needs and concerns. So we're hoping that these kinds of projects and initiatives can be really supported by things like photo essays and youth photo essays in order to complement this data set. So continuation of the projects, just to wrap up quickly, we're hoping to organize some future exhibits. The students expressed that they would really like to have the photos presented at their local high school to show all of their peers their hard work. The photos are with our hosts in Puerto Rico, and so they're helping us facilitate that. We would like, as a final project for this whole experience, to publish a book that includes the work of the students along with kind of an introduction context written by us. Although we're not sure exactly what sort of platforms or formats we could publish something like that on, so we're open to any recommendations if people have them, along with writing a blog to kind of advertise that final project. And we're really excited to continue participating in Natura and hopefully can continue connecting with other IRIS alumni to reflect on our experiences. So with that, I'll close. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you all. That was excellent. So nice to hear what you've been working on, and impressive what you accomplished. We have a few minutes for questions.
I just wanted to say thank you. That was so good to see all the work you've done. And I was wondering how you were planning, or if you were planning to leverage all the work you've done, and you explained that in the last slide. So if we can help you in Natura to publish, or even if you wanted some recommendations, I mean, the senior team has so much experience in that regard. For the blog, we have the Natura website, as you know, but I'm wondering whether you have also considered the Nature of Cities as a website is very good home. It's also a partner of Natura, so I think your work really aligns with the kind of things they want to leverage. So this is one thing, and also for a book. So the Early Career Network is currently finalizing a sort of we call it the compendium for participatory methods for nature-based solutions. And we are also considering the Nature of Cities as a home for it. So just something to think about. The Nature of Cities is a very good platform for leveraging your work. Thank you. That was amazing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great suggestions, Alon. Thank you. I'll give other folks a second to chime in. Otherwise, I have a question for you. All right, so I'm wondering, I think this is amazing and thank you for sharing. I'm wondering if the students had overlap and shared ideas I like the way that I mean, that's really great that you had them kind of focus on a theme. And I'm wondering if there was overlap in the themes, if there was an opportunity for them to discuss that early so that there was less overlap, or if it was um, there was opportunity for them to discuss it after the fact or as they were in progress and think about that.
I would say that we kind of encouraged them to like kind of bounce ideas off of each other. I think we were a little bit nervous that things kind of balancing like giving them the freedom to develop whatever theme they wanted versus like giving them some sort of directions that they didn't feel lost. So we really wanted them to kind of like discuss with each other what each other were thinking and maybe bounce off of each other's themes as inspirations for their own. And there's a few instances where people's topics were quite similar to each other, like almost the same. But I would say generally, they each, given how much they could kind of express their personal perspectives, even if they had similar themes, the ways that they actually perceived that theme and like what they actually took away from it were quite unique for each student. So I would say there's a little bit of both, and we definitely wanted them to feel free to kind of like overlap with each other if they wanted to and felt more comfortable.
Yeah, that's a nice way of doing it.
And just to add into, I think like we were really limited on time. We only had an hour and a half for each workshop session. And so it would have been great to have 3.5 hours or a whole day for each session. I think we could have really like dived in a bit deeper, but.
Yeah, impressive with just an hour and a half 3 times. Miriam, do you want to ask the last question before we sign off?
Can you hear me? Hello, hi Shruti, Margot, and Izzy. Well, thanks for your work. From back from Puerto Rico, I know your Marissa and Kidani are here, and they were really important and amazing part. But I want to congratulate you because I feel in many ways when we talk about cities and any academic project, non-academic, you were really lucky to come with local resources that basically were the direct source to amazing teachers. I feel that you really get to work with power users, and you were at the very end power users. I do want to mention that after you presented the photo exhibit, it comes into my mind a common denominator of how, regardless their style and message, there was a strong political expression, not only about what ecology in within a theoretical context means. No, we grew up and we kind of understand the terms, but how does that translate in basically what is that limitation to access the resources they're living in? And you guys were here for 6 weeks and you got to know how difficult it was to move around, how difficult sometimes was to find a beach in the city, and that distinguish about being a visitor but being a resident, where sometimes you feel yourself as a visitor. So I feel it's a global, it's a political sadly trend that at the very end it came to me in the photo essays that you built, that there was a strong voice of resistance, of how people need to claim back those spaces, and how youth that are gonna inherit this mess or whatever we come up, or are gonna emigrate, are gonna have a that perspective of what they remember. So I just want to remember that you were really lucky to got to be in the local, in the really, I think, a detailed vision of what it's Puerto Rico that not many people got to see. And really congratulate you because you did it with a lot of sensibility, which is something absolutely important from a research or a visitor perspective. So kudos to your work and all the best.
Thank you, Miriam. That's a really lovely way to end this. And I just want to echo the power users. That's an excellent term for these three and actually everybody who presented today. So thank you everybody for joining, and thank you to our presenters for sharing. We will post the recording of this on the Natura YouTube channel, and we will look forward to seeing you all after the summer break. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.